Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I am very excited to bring to you Michelle Causton. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She is a multifaceted individual whose professional journey has been marked by a relentless pursuit of excellence and a profound commitment to fostering growth and development of others. With a dynamic presence as a public speaker and educator, Michelle has left an indelible mark on the worlds of accounting, education, and professional development. A fellow of the Chartered Professional Accountants and a holder of an MBA from Laurentian University, Michelle's credentials demonstrate her dedication to mastering her craft. She's a firm believer of the power of communication, me too, and ethical leadership, me too. Michelle has dedicated herself to promoting these values throughout her career, whether through her captivating speeches, insightful writings, or engaging online content. She strives to instill a sense of integrity and purpose in all those she encounters. As a member of the Canadian Association of Public Speakers, Michelle continues to share her insights and expertise with audiences around the world, captivating and inspiring them with her engaging delivery and thought-provoking ideas. Today, we're going to talk about 3 reasons why brands must align with Gen Z's ethical demands. Please join me in welcoming my guest, Michelle Causton. Michelle, so happy to have you on.
Vicki, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm really looking forward to this chat.
Thank you. And we always start out with really 2 easy questions to get us on the roll here. So the first is share with everybody, where do you live? Where do you call home right now?
Oh, well, that one is easy. Nipissing in Ontario, Canada. About 4 hours north of Toronto if you're driving. So it's a rural area. I love living here, but it does have its disadvantages because, you miss some of the city life.
Yes. I spent a good bit of time, probably 3 years in and out of Toronto area as I was launching the UPS store for UPS. So did get to meet a lot of wonderful people in Canada. The next question is to share a bit of your journey. We gave a lot of what you do today and your accolades, but I'd like to have you just spend a few minutes just sharing about the journey. The paths are often not straight. You definitely have to pivot through life, and there's certain things that as you journey that cause you to have those aha moments that outline what your mission and purpose might be today. So what were those times, please?
Yeah, as you said, these things are often complex paths. I started out in accounting and certainly enjoyed that work. I loved talking to my clients and helping them to understand what they were looking at and realize that when you're comfortable with financial data, when you understand the rules of the game, it all makes sense to you, but it doesn't make sense to everyone else. And they're often afraid to ask questions in case they look foolish, especially when it's around their business, right? They really don't like feeling that they're not in control. And I found that people always were looking for when they would open up, they wanted more information. That's fair. And transitioned into teaching, which was an absolute delight because you know what? Not everyone wants to talk about accounting. And here I had
Mhm.
this captive audience that had to listen to me talk about accounting. And what I discovered was that again, and I would tell the students, you're the wizards. People are going to look to you for reliable information. They think you know something they don't know, because for a lot of people, numbers are magic. And so I would ask them to take that responsibility very seriously. And then I also realized as we integrated ethics into more and more of the curriculum that it was really badly done. It was always a question of, your boss asks you to do this obviously horribly wrong thing, to lie, to cheat, to steal. What should you do? And the answer was very predictable. Tell them you won't, take it up the ladder to the highest levels of the organization, and then quit. And the students, would dutifully write that down. It was not engaging the brain. And one student actually, really quite honestly said, you know what? If I do a good job and they're paying me well, I'm just going to do what they ask me to do. So you start to see the flaw in the system and what's
Yeah.
happening. And then you realize when I talk to business people that when you suggest that perhaps a course of action was not taking everything into consideration, they'd say, yeah, but that's the path to success. That's how I'm going to get rich, how I'm going to really promote myself.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I was forced to teach marketing for a little while. And I say forced to because I thought it would be really interesting, but a lot of it, and my apologies to anyone in marketing out there, but a lot of it felt very unethical. A lot of it was manipulative. So I got
Mhm.
really fascinated with these aspects of it. Through it all, I was doing volunteer work and I was on boards and I was understanding the dynamics of boards and how they worked. I got very interested
Yeah.
in that. So this is why my business is called Busy Mind, because it's like I have too many things that I want to think about. I'm incredibly curious, and I'll follow those thoughts. It led me to really talking about ethics in
Mhm.
many, many ways. It always comes back to how we communicate, how we deal with people, and ethics.
Oh my goodness. So true. I've been in business for over 40 years, and there were people that I worked with that you just shook your head and said, I just can't be associated with this person. In one case, he was the leader of the company, and
Oh,
it was like, no, this is not the culture that's for me. But it is hard to walk away from things, and you do have people that are stronger personalities than you that make you feel like you're questioning something that everybody does. Why would you even question this? So definitely an interesting concept. I'd like for you to spend a little bit of time talking about the role of social media in shaping the Gen Z's ethical views, because that social media is a big part of that generation and I'm sure future generations.
yeah. I like to say that I'm an optimistic cynic, so sometimes what I say sounds terribly cynical, but it sort of frames my thought process. It doesn't define me. And so one of the things when we talk about social media, we are talking about still a form of media, and the media has had a great influence on every generation. And
It's
we could
true.
go into the whole history of how that evolved and what have you. And now we like to think that social media is more, I'll say, democratic. It's more open. It's not controlled by any one company, but quite honestly, that's
Mm,
not true.
yeah.
Anyone who's been kicked off of Facebook, for example, for stating a contrary view or using a word that didn't fit their parameters realizes it's not all that democratic. It's not like standing
Yeah.
on a street corner and then spouting off how you feel. Not that that's a good way to promote yourself either, but it has influenced certainly a generation. It actually influences, I'd say, most generations.
That's
Anyone that's
true.
using a computer is impacted by it. And one of the worst things about social media is because it does use AI, and so it starts to filter and it brings you what it thinks you want to know. It supports what you've already thought about, what you've already liked, and it reinforces it. So we end up in this echo chamber, and this is what's happening with younger people who don't trust Facebook, probably correctly so, but they think other things are better. And yeah, better being, better than what, I guess. And so they are hearing a lot of information and then taking that and acting on it without necessarily applying I'll say, a critical thought process to that. We're all guilty of that, but I think the younger you are, the more likely you are. Remember our mothers saying to us, just because everyone's doing it, will you do it? Yeah,
Yeah.
there's
It's
a point
interesting
in
you
your
said
life.
that. But what I found too is, and just using my mom and who is in her 80s, but what I found is I could suggest something to her, but she will listen to some unknown person on the web to tell her and believe that and do that, there is no discerning. It's all those things that you told me when I was younger just out the window. And so I think that's a problem too, because it's like, why did you buy that? That's not anything that you need or should have. So
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great example, and it does show that cross-generational. It's not limited to. I think that the younger people, and you know what, you may be right, and I hadn't really thought about this, but also the oldest of the generations
yes.
and the younger ones are going to be most susceptible because at least we kind of evolved with some of this social media and learned through experience some of the pros and cons. But the older people they're seeing someone who obviously is very important because they're on TV, so to speak. They're in
Mhm.
front of me telling me stuff, and they don't realize, like you said, that just anybody can do that. And
That's
and
true.
social influencer that just drives me crazy. How do you get this
Mm.
following? Well, if you
Yeah.
try to figure that out, you'll find that there's a whole lot of sneaky ways of attracting a following. So, this
Mhm.
actually diminishes the credibility of some people that have a very loud voice. We're
Mhm.
all susceptible to misinformation, and
Mhm.
and social media amplifies it because of that
Yeah.
tendency to use what we already know and what we already believe and then reinforce it.
And I think that's
Very
a
good.
really great point that you bring up about the loud voice, because even before social media, in a classroom, in an office, the person that's the loudest speaker that talks the most is the one that controls the situation. And those that are mild-mannered or not as confident will sit back and just stay with the flow, whereas they may have a better idea, they may have the right position to have, but that louder voice is always speaking over them and taking control.
And you mentioned that when you were talking about working with someone who, you felt was unethical. And again, depending on your age and your experience and a lot of other things, they can convince you that what
Yeah,
they're saying is correct. And they may patronize you and you're young, you don't know, this is the way
that's
the
right.
world works. And it's hard. And that's just one-on-one where you have more
Yeah.
chance to filter and factor in things. So yeah, when someone on the internet is telling you something, I often challenge people just simply when they say, well, I heard, and they'll tell me something, and I'll say, how do you know that? They say, well, they told me. I said, how do you know it's true? Like, what have you
Mhm.
done? If it's important, it's not
Mhm.
important, who cares? But if it's important,
Mhm.
yeah.
And as we look at the global environment, I know whenever I first was doing international work, and there are different in cultures, there are different ways to do things, and some cultures allow for influencing with goods and things that are not acceptable. And that's one of those louder voices that you have to be really, really strong and true to your ethics and the core values of the company as well as your own to stay within the legal realm of things.
Legal and knowing yourself, because of course, when we're in business, compliance with the legal requirements is important. Absolutely. But then going beyond that, and I remember years ago, the conversation being, but if you go to this country, and in order to get anything done, you have to pay a bribe. And why is that different than when you go, say, in Canada or the US, and you have to pay an administrator a fee to process whatever application you're putting in? What's the difference? One's controlled, the other one is, under the table. But is there
Mhm.
a significant difference? And so people would justify and say, no, no, bribery is just the way it's done in that country. I think we feel
Mhm.
differently now, But you're right, when you get into cross culture and generation, all these things impact it. And there's a
Yeah.
definite need for a more thoughtful approach to ethics than ever before. It's always been important, but really a thoughtful approach because we can no longer rely on what we already know.
Hmm. So, what are
Yeah.
3 ways the Gen Z's ethical stance is changing marketing strategies?
This is really interesting, and we're not going to have enough time to delve into it completely, but it's really interesting because this again, generation does trust social influencers more than you and I probably would.
Mhm.
They feel empowered to do their own research. And perhaps then they're very susceptible to their sources of information not being reliable. They don't filter that, but they feel they're doing
Mhm.
their own research. So they are interesting in as much as they will react to something that they hear. And this leaves again a vulnerability to someone who deliberately wants to tarnish a company's reputation. So if they post something and then people go, oh, and they'll move away from that. Gen Z will balance practicality with that, where you and I might say, oh, that company did that. That's terrible. I don't need to buy from that company anymore. There's alternatives. I'll buy from someone else. The Gen Z says, yeah, that wasn't good. And then they'll look to see, they'll read
Mhm.
more social media. They'll then reinforce what they want, which is I want to buy that product. I really like that product. And I'm not the unethical person. I'm sure they're going to smarten up any minute and change.
Mhm.
And so then the company will release press releases that say, they've cleaned up their act, whether they have or not. Again, Gen Z very susceptible to it, but I think most of us are. Most of us
Mhm.
are.
I think it's interesting too. My the youngest daughter's 33, and she watches quite a few shows that are out there now and it's interesting. They're from other countries mostly, but I'm sure there's US folks. And I guess they're influencers, but what they do is they buy things and then they open them up to demonstrate, would you recommend this? Is this quality? Is it what they said that they were selling? And I think it's in some ways a great thing because, before our generation, I'm 66, so we would see all that you got to buy this, and they advertise that it's great, but you never actually saw the product, especially um, there. She was just watching one that had an advent calendar, with all of the days before the holiday, Christmas. And so she opened every single one. And I thought, oh, that takes out of the surprise. But my daughter says, but you know that you're getting something that's good. Why wouldn't you want to know in advance? And I thought, oh,
And that's, of course, what companies are recognizing and wanting these people to promote their products. And so influencers often receive all these free things.
yeah.
So I have no way of, and again, some of them seem more credible than others, for sure. But I have really no way of vetting whether that person that's unboxing this item and showing all this enthusiasm, whether they would, on the other hand, unbox something and say, well, what a piece of
Oh,
this is. I don't know. I always think to myself, I'd like to see them do that once.
they
Just tell me,
do it.
oh,
They do it.
oh,
Honest to
good.
gosh, and again, these people from Ireland and Great Britain that I've seen, but they do, and they'll say, "This is crap. You shouldn't even pay $1 for this," or and so and that really sets their credibility as someone that they should watch because
That's
they
right.
will say, "This is crap. Don't buy." But yes, if you had somebody that was everything is wonderful, it's fantastic, that's just like the new cars sell or the used car salesman that says this is a wonderful car, and you drive it off the lot and it's a lemon.
Vicki, this in raising this particular thing, we can see this rise in packaging. So on the one hand, we collectively say things about the environment, about we should have less packaging. We need less packaging. This is ridiculous, all this waste going in. And we mean it when we say it. We all try to do our bit with recycling. We're a little bit skeptical about what's happening with it, but we try. And then these packaging, and I'm not going to I think it started with the Apple products, where even the box it came in was so gorgeous and so
Mhm.
interesting and so beautiful. And I would keep all these stupid boxes from all my Apple products because they were so lovely. Never used them again, but I guess it
That's
was
right.
better than going in the landfill, I guess. But so now companies increasingly will spend a lot of time, money, and effort in making sure that the package is also beautiful, because then when it's on air, when somebody's unboxing it for as an influencer, it has that appeal, right? Nobody wants
Mhm.
to take a cardboard box and rip it apart to find this diamond inside. They want the whole package, like a
Mhm.
Tiffany, piece
Yeah,
of jewelry comes in a lovely package. So
that
we
blue
like
box.
that.
That's so true. So, why do Gen Zs choose ethics over brand loyalty?
Yeah, as I said, I think they do. And I think that certainly companies really need to be mindful of that. But at the same time, they are collectively a surprisingly loyal group. They demonstrate things that make, again, observationally, I'll hear employers say, for example, that Gen Z employees aren't loyal. And I think there's a feeling that that's true. I don't know that it really translates though. What I'm reading, what I'm seeing is that they will express these things and call for action and then continue to buy what has been a reliable product. So they're very much substance over form, which is
Mhm.
interesting, right? It's this dichotomy. They
Yeah.
love this boxing, and yet at the same time, they really do care. They really, the
Mhm.
advent calendar, perfect example. Want to know what's in those little windows. Really,
Yeah.
that matters more than the just the pretty pictures of it. So they are, I think it's important. And I think that one of the things that they really will react to is disingenuous behavior. So if a corporation, if a company, a business thinks they want to reach Gen Z and they hire someone to talk like Gen Z, they're not impressing anyone, right?
Yeah.
If you hire a genuine person of that generation, or maybe a little bit older that's still in touch, who naturally and natively speaks like that, that will resonate. They like that because they believe that there's no BS involved now.
Hmm.
You and I could talk about whether that's true or not, but
Yeah,
that's how
right.
they feel. So that when we use, well, can I tell you a little story? An academic friend of
Sure.
mine who she had a student that was really mad at her, and the student reported her to the dean, and she said the reason she didn't like this teacher is she was using archaic language. And I said, kind of words were you using?
Oh.
Archaic. Well, she just was using words that this student didn't know. And this was a Gen Z student who felt this was phony and fake. Of course, I happen to know this woman. That's actually how she talks. And she wasn't using grandiose words to try and confuse anyone. She was using words that you and I would go, yeah, okay. But this younger person saw this as BS. They saw this as, oh, she's
Yeah.
posturing and trying to make me look stupid. So the lesson I took from that is that's going to be true in marketing as well. If you're going
Yeah.
to use certain phrases, make sure you're using them correctly. Nothing worse than an oldster saying, cool hip things. So
Yeah.
always
There
been
was
true.
Reba McEntire has a new show called Happy Place, and there was just a thing in this show, she has a younger 30 something that turns up to be her stepsister from her dad who had passed away. And so to be hip, Reba is saying these words like Riz, and I looked at the urban, but then she said another word. I can't remember what it was, but it wasn't the right. And the girl's like, no, 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 don't use that, don't use that. And I teach the youth public speaking all the time, and they're always trying to get me to, and it's like, guys, I'm 66. I don't know. Just talk to me in English. I don't know. But they're always trying to teach me whatever it is. But
Great example. And I think that, again, we probably do a reasonably good job of translating what, this language that's being used if we have an interest and we want to know. But we cannot authentically use it ourselves, even though we might really understand what that sentence meant. When we reply, we have to find another way of saying it. It just
yeah.
doesn't fly. So I think that's really important for businesses if they want to
Mhm.
really reach Gen Z, is to be mindful of the need for authenticity. And so that's, again, it's an ethical thing, right? To be
Mm.
authentic.
I think it's a challenge for anybody that's in marketing, public relations, anything, because there are 5 generations out there of people that you have to communicate with, and you can't really just have a single platform, really. It's almost like when I used to teach people how to do websites. It's like you have to have several doors that go to the same place because not everybody is going to click on that button. They're going to think I should click over here. I should, and so you need to make sure you click over here, it works. If you click up there, it works. You click that button, it works. Well, it's whenever you communicate with people, I think one of the things in my career development always was you need to be able to call a multi-level communication. And more of it was you're talking to your boss, your peers, your subordinates, or whatever. But now it's like this generation of people needs you need to talk in their language lingo as well as 5 others. And I just lost.
Who's up on me?
Oh,
Yeah, there we are. You're back. I lost you for a minute.
yeah, my power just went on. I'm gonna pause
Oh,
first.
and I think again, tying this whole thing together, one of the things that we're having with social media, with media in general, is that we're really creating these lines of demarcation. I mean, I'm a boomer. You're a boomer. That word, David Foote wrote a book on boom, bust, and echo that caught on. But the other generations, started saying, oh, we want a defining factor, or somebody said they wanted to define them. So we put people in boxes, and of course, it's not, accurate. And so you can make broad brushstroke statements, but it's not necessarily true. So when you're talking, and I think you and I could have a lot of fun talking about communication style and how you get your point across. I've
Mm.
always said to people, if you have a diverse audience, what you need to be is mindful of this. And one really easy example is I'm an accountant. Accountants love acronyms. Oh my goodness, we
Oh,
just love acronyms.
yes,
And then
sir.
I went, yeah, so I knew all those acronyms. Then I went to academia and they had a whole new set of acronyms and I knew nothing. And here I am, seasoned, experienced person, leader in my community, have no idea what's going on in this. I've lost the conversation. And that
Yeah,
informed me. And I said, whenever I'm using an acronym, even if I'm absolutely certain my audience knows what it means, what will be the harm of saying, for example, GAP, general accepted accounting principles, and just go on. Just don't
yeah.
don't go for those of you who don't know, because that's condescending and
That's
it takes
exactly
people
right.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we do the same
You,
thing, I think, with young people. Just make sure they understood the important parts of what you're
yeah,
saying.
yeah.
Clarity in
Yes, yes,
communication.
absolutely. I'm from Pittsburgh, and there was a whole book written about Pittsburghese because the different, and so from culture to culture, from country to country, city to city, there are different things. But and at UPS, when I worked there, we had a whole book of the things, and every time I did a presentation or a speech, I had to make sure that I outlined all of the acronyms because there was always a new influx of people that had no idea what this term was. So you're very accurate about that.
I
But
had
I
a
love that you
mentor
said,
I had a mentor who said to me very thoughtfully, he said, words are like clothes. They can be used to reveal or conceal. I thought, yeah, I've loved that phrase. I thought
Mhm.
perhaps he'd read it somewhere. I've never found it anywhere else. So I credit Ron Francis with that. It is so true. So
Yeah,
finding the words that will include people as opposed to exclude people when we
yeah,
want, depending on what we want to
so
do.
good.
And the buzzwords now are very prolific, right? We
Yeah,
talk
they
about things
are.
all the time and we say 2 or 3 words, we all nod, but doesn't
Mhm.
mean we all agree or we all understand it the same way. So very mindful of that as well. And young people are very susceptible to jargon. They really like
Mhm.
phrases that simplify complex concepts. Again, we all do, but
Mhm. So
sort
what
of
would
off
be
track.
three practical tips for a manager to foster ethical behavior among their Gen Z?
Amongst their employees now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that the what keeps resonating is that they have a finely attuned BS meter. And in this regard, it reminds me so much of our generation in that weren't going to trust anyone over 40.
That's
We
right.
were, yeah, we were going to drop out. We weren't going to work with the system. We were going to be off doing these other things. And then we had a whole lot of generations that were very compliant and very lockstep and followed the promise. And they became very disillusioned because they did everything they were supposed to do and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And so we get to this generation now, and they're saying, no, don't try and tell me that if I work hard, I'm going to be the boss. Don't believe you. It's not going to happen. And so, again, what they're looking for is honest communication. When you think about it, how hard is that?
Yeah.
Well, apparently a lot harder than we think. So
Mm.
be very, very direct. Um, and Gen Z, for all their social media and computer skills, they actually prefer one-on-one conversation. If you're going to tell them something, they don't want an email, they don't want a Zoom video or a meeting. They want you to say, listen, Vicki, this is what I need from you. This is what I want to have happen. They want it clear, concise, no BS. And so one of the ways you do that in your culture, within your organization, is to reinforce it and have them, of course, tell you what you just
Mm.
said. So don't
Yeah.
just say, do you understand? Say, well,
Right.
can you tell me how you think that's going to impact on your performance on your job?
Yeah. That's
And then you
great.
can have a bigger conversation. And it's I think surprises a lot of people because they say, well, they're digital natives. Well, they're comfortable with
Mm.
technology, but they're not necessarily skilled with technology. So keep that in mind as well. They are very loyal. So if you feel that you have a young person working for you that isn't doing what as much as you think, don't expect that they're going to be that keen go-getter of a few, 10 years ago, what you got when you got a new employee, they were keen. These people are coming in, like, okay, show me what you got. Prove that this is a
Hmm.
great place to work. So they've changed the responsibility, put it on the company. Tell me why I should want to work for you, and then live up to it. Can't be hype. It has to be true. It's challenging. They will become bored more easily, and
Yeah.
that's, again, lots of reasons for that. But they are surprisingly willing to move within the organization rather than leave the organization. So if you haven't really ticked them right off, they will stay with you, but challenge them. Find out what they need to do. They're often um, what would be the word I'm looking for? That they'll have multiple skill sets. And
Hmm.
so they will want to go over and work in that department. They might not have a degree in it. They might not be, why you hired them, but why not see if there's a fit there for them? They might surprise you. And so that's another challenge for businesses. We can't kind of put people in boxes and move them through things in the same way that we traditionally would.
Yeah. It's interesting. And sometimes, as we were talking about before, the bucketizing of the different generations, but sometimes even with like the millennials, which we gave such a bad rap to, some of the things that we said about them, I remember back when I was 19 and 20, and I thought I was that way. I and some of the when I got hired at 20 years old, oh gosh, I was 19, but I and my best friend, we went to a business school, and I went to work for an accounting firm. She went to work for PPG. PPG had this great program where you worked for anywhere from 2 months to a year in various departments to see where you were a good fit. And then once you had that, then you had the option to say, yes, I want to stay in this department, or I want to continue to investigate. And it gave you a great exposure to the company and the different aspects of it. So wherever you ended up, you were a much more rounded individual. And that's when I joined UPS after working for almost 15 years. Um, I found that in 27 years that I worked there, I probably had 20 different jobs,
Yeah.
but I never left the company. But my experience and my exposure allowed me to go and do great things. And so, I think it's just things have been out there that way. It's just more and more companies need to know the benefits of doing things in that way.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that some of what we're hearing is amplified by social media. When I talk to people that work with many generations, they might have, young people today kind of a thing, but that's always been true, right? They're not
Yeah,
like
that's
us.
absolutely true. You
Yeah.
remember when we were young, we were just like no good, terrible, don't
Well, and we were
lazy.
lucky. We were lucky though, once we, sort of got past our real rebellious stage and we entered the workforce, it was fairly clear what we should be doing. And today this is systemic, right? This is huge issues, but young people were told that they could be anything they wanted. It's
Hmm.
not true, never was. But we
Yeah.
told them that. We also told them that the
Mhm.
path to fame, fortune, and riches was university education. Also
That's not
not true.
true. Hmm.
I've said that university and post-secondary education is wasted on the youth. Okay, there's a
I
broad
said that too.
brushstroke. Yeah,
I didn't go to
that's
college till I was 45. And my experience there was so rich and wonderful. I said, if I would have done this at 20, I would have never experienced the same thing I am right now. I brought so much value to the rest of the classmates that were 20 and such, because I had, yes, that thing they're teaching you right now, you are going to use.
that way that you would have the depth that the professor might not have because they've been teaching now for, they knew they were in that field at one point, but now they've been teaching and they're only reading about the updates. You're living the updates. You're living what's
Yeah.
happening. You're living why you might need statistics. Guess what?
Mhm.
Surprise, surprise, you'll use them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that we're in for a huge reform in education. If and it's one of the like accounting and education, my two fields are very staid, very traditional. Don't Nobody likes change. They really don't like change, and they will
Yeah.
fight tooth and nail, right? But I think that the time is right. I mean, the people are, and young people in particular, I think, are more the idea that I can learn what I need to learn when I need to learn it
And
and
how
not
I
sit
need to learn it.
exactly, not sit for 4 years hearing a bunch of things that I don't need to know, or I don't know why I need to know because I'm too young to understand the relevance. And what happens then is when they're dissatisfied, both their professors and their parents will most likely tell them, figure out what you need to do to pass, because the goal is the degree, not the education, not the
Yeah.
learning, not the
Yeah.
understanding. It's a rare student. I taught for many years. It's a rare student who actually is trying to personalize it and absorb it and make sense out of it. And when they're young, it's hard, but I've certainly had students that did. But
Hmm.
but they're the exception. Most students are, is this going to be on the exam? And I get
Yeah.
I've been in those classes. When I took my MBA, I was so disappointed when one professor um, basically uh, marked me poorly on something that I had thought I'd done very well on. And so we'll have a conversation about this. Where did I go wrong? And basically there was one right, it was an essay, but there was one right answer to what this company should do. What do you mean there's one right answer? Well, this is what they did do. Well, that I didn't think was the exercise to look up what they did do. I thought the exercise to say at this point in time, how do we go forward? What might we do? And I said something
Mm.
completely radical and completely different than what they said, but I said it really well, Vicki. And he marked me very badly because I didn't say, go to China. That's the big market.
Yeah.
That's where. No. I thought, oh, see, we've got problems, people.
See, and see, and we could have a whole nother podcast on this because we ask people in business to come in to be innovative, to be creative, to think outside the box, to be what's that next thing that nobody knows. Yet they spent the last 12 years, 15 years, whatever it is, having somebody tell them, this is how it is. There's only one way, you know, and it's like, no, you just like GPS. I can go and put a destination in, but I can change how I get there. And that's what, and I think that's got to have to be a change in the way we educate kids is to let them discover that there is more than one way to do things. Yes, in math, there's one way maybe to get to it that's prescribed, but if you come up with an answer, my husband was a math teacher. It's like, well, show me your work. And the kids, I don't want to show you work. This is the answer. It's like, but no, but show me how you got there, because it could be different, and the class could benefit from this, seeing a different way that you did this. But we don't
Yeah.
teach that.
I used to say to students, and because we dealt with some complicated math formulas, and I'm old enough that we were teaching it with just a calculator, so we weren't using computers or anything, and they'd
Right,
have to do a
right.
lot of math, and they'd give me the answer, and I'd say, show me your answer, and they'd get a no. I said, but if I don't know how you arrived there, it's not the answer I was expecting, so I don't know whether you could just made that number up and you get zero, or did you almost get it right? Oh, here's what you did wrong, and now I can inform you, help you to see a different
Yeah.
path. But showing the work shouldn't be, I don't know. I got really frustrated with that because my son, when he was quite young, could do math, do multiplication in his head before he was taught to do it, and it
Oh
was
yeah,
quite
a lot of
amazing.
kids. Yeah.
Yeah. And but when he went to school and they said, "Well, show me your work," he couldn't show it the way they did it in the textbook. He visualized it differently, and to this day, he says he's bad at math. He never was, but they beat it out of him,
Yeah.
'cause
Well, that's why
he
they
couldn't.
don't like it, you know.
Mhm.
And my
Well,
husband taught art and math, and he actually could show them visually things using art to be able to understand algebra and trigonometry and things.
it'd be fabulous.
Yeah, he's a
Yeah.
right left brain. So is my youngest daughter. She's right and left brain. But a lot of kids can't do that, can't see that. Word
Yeah, we train
problems.
we train people in life to give us the answer that we expect.
Yeah.
And I think that we start with, parents and schools do it. And then, as you said, you go out into the workforce and you think, well, why don't we do this? And the boss says, oh, we tried that 20 years ago. It didn't work. That's
Yeah.
the end of that conversation, isn't it? We're
Mhm.
really very frightened collectively of the unknown. And we have forever in evolution been trying to master the future, to master the unknown, to make
Mhm.
accurate predictions. And we've done everything from, throwing chicken bones and rolling dice and the grand wizard who would sit back and pretend they had all the answers. And we haven't we
Mhm.
haven't really evolved very much from that because now we're using AI and expecting it to give us the right answer. And we cannot accept that there is only what there is going forward. We can do
Mhm.
better, but we're never going to get accurate, if you will, to
Yeah.
predict exactly what's going to happen. We
Yeah,
just can't.
well, it's just the same thing with marketing. Marketing, it's all garbage in, garbage out, or I can have you believe anything that you want to believe. So,
So
yes.
fascinating. We all fall prey
Mhm.
to that fear of
Mhm.
missing out and that I
Mhm.
need that. I've challenged myself on a number of occasions with my finger on the button to buy something that I saw and I thought, oh my gosh, I love this. And say, but why do I need it? You want it. Okay. If you can afford it and you want it, go ahead. But don't fool yourself into thinking that you need it.
Yeah,
Sometimes you do. Mostly you don't.
right.
And we got off topic, Vicki, but I'm having a wonderful conversation with
Yeah.
you.
Well, as I said, we'll have to come back and have another chat. But for those of you that have been intrigued, interested, and enthusiastically want to say, Vicki, would you please just tell me how I can get in touch with Michelle Causton? You know the drill. You should, if you're just listening, you should have been taking notes all along. But I will be sharing that information right now. You can go grab a paper, pencil, pen, whatever it is to get what I read for you. But if you can't do that if you're driving, be safe and know that on my YouTube channel, Vicki Noethling, please subscribe, as well as my findyourleadershipconfidence.com website. In the show notes, you can find all this information. So as mentioned, the website is bzmind.ca. That's bzmind.ca. Facebook and LinkedIn, you can search by her name, Michelle Causton for Facebook and Michelle Causton and a bunch of numbers, but just search for Michelle. Causton is a Causton again. And for some of you spell Michelle with one L, but it's two L's. So Michelle has two L's. Okay. And then YouTube is at BZMIND 6262. BZMIND 6262. I will let Michelle talk to you about some things she might have on our website, resources, links that could help you, and also how often she's on social media and YouTube and what she puts out there that might be of interest or helpful to you. Michelle, it's all yours.
Yeah, it's a reflection of my busy mind, and there are articles on ethics, on AI, on generational issues. They do tie together, but it's not a black and white narrow channel. I also have links to online courses that I have created, may be of interest to someone. I have as well an opportunity if you would like me to come and speak about ethics or about how to create an ethical culture in your workplace, how to cross generationally draw people into having a thoughtful, ethical process in decision making. I'd love to come and speak to you or your company. So you can find that information online as well.
Very good. Michelle, it's just been so wonderful chatting with you. Again, we could have a chat for hours and hours, but we'll just have to have a follow-on episode, as I sometimes do with others. But just want to thank you for being such a wonderful guest.
And thank you for inviting me. I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, so I'm glad that it worked out as well as it did. You're a great interviewer, and thank you for that, to bring
Thank you.
out some of the topics. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And as always, I remind everyone that life is a journey, and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling, signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.